What happens when the weakest wolf in the pack turns out to be the one the moon goddess herself has been waiting for? For Elara Moonwhisper, life had always been simple: survive, stay silent, and never draw attention. As an omega in the Silverpine pack, she existed at the bottom of a hierarchy as old as the wolf itself. While alphas commanded and betas enforced, omegas like her scrubbed floors, prepared meals, and kept their eyes down. Her scent, lavender and morning dew with hints of wildflowers, was soft, unassuming, easily overlooked in a world that valued strength above all else. But when Alpha Cade Blackthorn rejected her in front of the entire pack during the Harvest Moon ceremony, severing their fated mate bond with a declaration that echoed through the clearing like a death sentence, everything changed. And what happens next, no one was prepared for. Not the pack that cast her out, not the Alpha who thought he'd traded destiny for ambition, and certainly not the 10 ancient guardians who had been waiting centuries for her to finally wake up. The harvest moon hung fat and golden over the Silverpine pack lands, casting everything in amber light. Elara stood at the edge of the ceremonial clearing, her thin frame nearly swallowed by the crowd of wolves pressing in from all sides. The scent of anticipation hung thick in the air: pine needles and excitement, anxiety and cologne. The musk of 200 werewolves gathered for the most important night of the season. Tonight, newly matured wolves would discover their fated mates. The moon goddess revealed such bonds only once a year, during the harvest moon, when the veil between the mystical and mundane grew thin enough for destiny to shine through. Elara hadn't expected to be called forward. At 22, she'd attended 5 of these ceremonies already, always on the sidelines, always unremarkable. Omegas rarely received fated mates. They were given arranged matches instead, paired off to strengthen alliances or produce the next generation of workers. She'd made peace with that future, or so she'd told herself. But then Elder Thorn had called her name. Elara Moonwhisper, step forward. The crowd had parted like water, leaving her exposed in the center of the clearing. Pack Alpha Marcus Silverpine watched from his carved wooden throne, his silver-streaked hair gleaming in the moonlight. Beside him sat Luna Catherine, her expression carefully neutral. The beta wolves flanked them, enforcers, advisors, the spine of pack hierarchy. And there, standing at the front of the alphas in training, was Cade Blackthorn. He was magnificent. 6'4" of pure muscle and authority, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes like chips of ice. His scent, forest and embers, ozone and steel, rolled across the clearing in waves, making every unmated female wolf present shift restlessly. He was the strongest alpha the pack had produced in generations, destined to lead after Marcus stepped down. And apparently, according to the moon goddess herself, he was Elara's fated mate. The bond had snapped into place the moment their eyes met. She'd felt it like a golden thread wrapping around her heart, pulling tight, singing with a rightness that made her bones ache. The mate mark began to burn on her inner wrist, a glowing silver symbol that looked like a crescent moon cradled in wolf's paws. Cade's mark appeared too. She saw it blazing on his neck, just above his collar. For one perfect crystalline moment, Elara had felt hope bloom in her chest like spring flowers after winter. Then she'd seen his face: disgust, fury, and beneath it all, calculation. No. His voice cut through the clearing like a blade. I reject this bond. The crowd gasped. Rejections were rare. Fated mates were gifts from the moon goddess herself. To refuse one was to spit in the face of destiny. Elder Thorn stepped forward, his aged face creased with concern. Alpha Cade, you must understand what you're— I understand perfectly. Cade's voice dropped into an alpha command, the kind of tone that made weaker wolves drop to their knees. I am destined to lead this pack, to strengthen our bloodlines, to produce heirs that will make Silverpine the most powerful pack in the Northern Territories. He looked at Alara then, and his lip curled. And you expect me to tie myself to an Omega? A wolf so weak she's never even shifted? The words hit like physical blows. Alara felt her knees buckle. I, Cade Blackthorn, future alpha of Silverpine Pack, formally reject Ilara Moonwhisper as my mate. I sever this bond in the name of the Pack's future and my own destiny. The pain came instantly. The golden thread didn't just break, it shattered, sending shards of agony through every nerve in Alara's body. She screamed, couldn't help it, as the mate mark on her wrist burned like someone had pressed a brand into her flesh. The glowing symbol twisted, turned black, then crumbled into ash. She collapsed onto the packed earth, convulsing. The bond severing felt like dying. Her wolf, the one she'd never been able to reach, never been able to shift into, howled somewhere deep inside her, a sound of such anguish that Alara thought she might split apart from the force of it. Through the haze of pain, she heard Cade's voice again, cold and final. Remove her from the ceremony, and from the pack lands. An Omega who cannot even accept rejection with dignity has no place in Silverpine. Strong hands grabbed her arms, beta wolves, their grips bruising as they hauled her to her feet. Alara's legs wouldn't support her weight. Everything hurt. Her chest felt hollow, like someone had reached in and ripped out her heart. Please, she whispered, but no one was listening. They dragged her past rows of silent wolves. Some looked away. Others watched with pity, or worse, with satisfaction. She caught sight of Scarlet Redmane, Cade's training partner, a beautiful alpha female with hair like flame and a scent of cinnamon and iron. The she-wolf was smiling. "Father," Ilara managed to gasp, spotting her parents in the crowd. "Mother, please." Marcus Moonwhisper, a mid-level beta, met her eyes for just a moment. Then he looked away. Beside him, her mother Lydia pressed her face into Marcus's shoulder, refusing to look at her daughter at all. The message was clear. She'd brought shame to their family. An Omega rejected by an Alpha. They couldn't afford to defend her, not if they wanted to maintain their own standing in the pack. The guards dragged Alara past the tree line, into the forest that marked the pack's eastern border. The temperature dropped immediately. It was late October, and the northern territories were already kissed by winter's approach. Frost glittered on the fallen leaves. "Beyond this point is rogue territory," one of the guards said, his voice not entirely unkind. "We can't protect you out there." "You're banishing me?" Alara's voice came out broken, barely audible. "Alpha's orders. You have until dawn to clear the territory. After that, if you're found on Silverpine land, you'll be treated as a hostile rogue." They released her at the border marker, a standing stone carved with the pack's symbol. Then they turned and melted back into the trees, leaving her alone in the darkness. Alara stood there, shivering, as the reality of her situation sank in. She had no supplies, no weapon, no ability to shift into wolf form to defend herself or hunt, or even stay warm. She was human-shaped in a wolf's world, and winter was coming. The temperature continued to drop as she stumbled deeper into the forest, away from Silverpine land. She had nowhere to go. No other pack would take her. A rejected Omega, unable to shift, was worse than useless. She was a liability, and the human towns were 3 days' travel at least, assuming she even knew which direction to walk. The storm rolled in just before midnight. The sky opened up with a fury that felt personal, like the moon goddess herself was weeping. Rain turned to sleet, then to snow. The wind howled through the trees, cutting through Alara's thin ceremonial dress like it was made of paper. Her bare feet went numb first, then her hands. She found a barn, or what was left of one. The structure was ancient, half collapsed, probably abandoned when some human family had fled the northern wilds decades ago. But it had 3 walls and part of a roof, and that was more than she had. Alara crawled into the corner, pulled what remained of a moldy tarp over herself, and curled into the smallest ball she could manage. Her teeth chattered so hard she thought they might crack. The pain from the severed bond still throbbed in her chest, a constant reminder of her worthlessness. This is it, she thought distantly. This is how I die. She'd heard stories of wolves who died from rejected mate bonds. The grief alone could kill. Add hypothermia and exposure, and she wouldn't last the night. A wave of power washed over the forest suddenly, so strong it made her gasp. The air itself seemed to shimmer. Alara's vision began to blur. From cold or from dying, she couldn't tell anymore. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was movement in the swirling snow. Shapes, massive and dark, eyes that glowed like embers in the night. Then, nothing. Warmth. That was the first thing Alara noticed when consciousness returned. Warmth and the scent of aged oak and winter snow, pine and storm. A scent so powerful and grounding it made her wolf stir for the first time in her life. Her eyes fluttered open. She was still in the barn, still in the corner, but she wasn't cold anymore. She was surrounded by wolves, enormous wolves, each one easily twice the size of the largest alpha she'd ever seen. Their fur ranged from midnight black to silver white, storm gray to deep brown, and they were arranged in a protective circle around her. Their massive bodies blocking the wind and snow, sharing their supernatural heat. Alara's breath caught. She counted them slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 massive wolves, all watching her with intelligent, ancient eyes. They'd protected her through the night, kept her alive when she should have frozen to death. The largest wolf, a huge male with fur the color of smoke and steel, with eyes like liquid silver, rose to his feet. He was magnificent and terrifying, radiating an authority that made Alpha Cade look like a puppy in comparison. Alara watched, frozen, as the wolf began to shift. The transformation was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Most werewolves shifted with cracking bones and tearing sounds, a violent reshaping that took 30 seconds of agony. This was different. This was fluid, almost graceful. The wolf's form seemed to flow like water, bones and muscle rearranging themselves with barely a whisper of sound. Within moments, a man stood where the wolf had been. He was tall, taller even than Cade, with broad shoulders and a warrior's build. Scars crisscrossed his bare chest, each one a story of battle survived. His hair was dark, with silver threaded through it, pulled back from a face that was all hard angles and sharp intelligence. He looked to be in his early 40s, but something in his eyes suggested he was far, far older than that. He knelt down, bringing himself to Alara's level, and when he spoke, his voice was deep and resonant, carrying the weight of centuries. "Alara Moonwhisper," he said, and the sound of her name on his lips made her wolf keen with recognition. "We've been waiting for you." "Waiting?" Her voice came out as a rasp. Who are you?" "My name is Theron Stormcaller. These," he gestured to the 9 other wolves, who were now shifting into human form as well, revealing warriors both male and female, each one scarred and powerful, "are the Shadow Guard, and we have been searching for you for over 300 years. Alara's mind reeled. 300 years? That was impossible. Werewolves lived longer than humans, but not that long. A female warrior with platinum hair and eyes like ice stepped forward, her scent carrying notes of winter pine and silver moonlight. You don't remember the prophecy, do you? The old words? No. What prophecy? Theron settled back on his heels, his silver eyes never leaving her face. There is an ancient text, older than any of the current packs, written when the first wolves walked beside the moon goddess herself. It speaks of a wolf who would be born with power unlike any seen before. Power so great it would need to be bound, hidden, until the time was right. When the moon bleeds silver and the strongest falls to pride, the matriarch will wake where she was left to die. She will be marked by sorrow, forged in rejection's flame, and she will rise with power that none can tame. She will come when darkness gathers, when the old ways fade, the first and last daughter of the Luna's blade. The words seemed to echo in the air, resonating with something deep inside Alara's chest. Her wolf stirred again, stronger this time, pushing against barriers she'd never known were there. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I'm nobody. I'm just an Omega. I can't even shift." "You cannot shift," Theron said gently, "because someone made sure you couldn't. Your power was bound when you were just an infant, wrapped in chains of magic so complex it took us decades to understand them." His expression darkened. "Someone who loved you. Someone who feared what you might become." The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. "My parents." "Your parents," he confirmed. "Marcus and Lydia Moonwhisper. They bound your wolf when you were 3 days old, shortly after your first transformation. A transformation that should have been impossible for an infant. But you managed it anyway. You shifted into a form that terrified them. A form that would have drawn attention from every pack in the territories." Alara felt tears tracking down her cheeks. "They did this to me. Made me weak. Made me live as an Omega when I was... What? What am I?" "You are the matriarch reborn," said another warrior, a man with bronze skin and eyes like molten gold. "The first wolf, the Luna's chosen vessel. You are what all alphas fear and what the packs have forgotten. The true apex predator." "But the binding," Theron continued, his voice carrying a note of something like satisfaction, "required one specific condition to remain intact. Your fated mate bond had to stay whole. As long as that bond existed, the magic would hold." Understanding crashed over her like a tidal wave. Cade broke the bond. He shattered it. Theron's smile was sharp and dangerous. "He made a mistake. He didn't just reject you. He freed you." The moment the words left his lips, something inside Alara began to break. Not the painful shattering of the mate bond, but something else. Something that had been holding her back her entire life. She felt it crack, then splinter, then explode outward in a rush of power that made every wolf in the barn drop to one knee. Her wolf rose within her, and for the first time in her life, Alara heard her clearly. Finally, her wolf's voice was ancient and powerful, resonating through every cell in her body. "Finally, we are whole." "Who are you?" Alara thought back, awed. "I am you. I am the part they tried to chain. I am the power they feared. And now, my sister, we rise." The transformation came without warning. Alara's body began to flow, to change. But there was no pain. This wasn't the violent shifting she'd seen other wolves endure. This was something else entirely. Something primal and old and right. Her bones didn't snap. They flowed, elongating and strengthening, becoming denser than steel, yet more flexible than water. She felt her spine extend, her limbs reshape. Fur erupted across her skin, not brown or gray like normal wolves, but silver-white that seemed to glow with its own inner light. She grew, and grew, and kept growing. Energy erupted from her in waves, making the ancient barn timbers groan. The snow outside swirled into a vortex. The very earth beneath them trembled. When the transformation completed, Alara stood on 4 massive paws, looking down at the Shadow Guard warriors who were still on their knees. She was enormous, easily 3 times the size of even Theron's wolf form. Her fur shimmered like starlight, and when she glanced at her reflection in a broken piece of window glass, she saw her eyes had turned violet, glowing with an otherworldly light. Her first howl shook the forest. Birds exploded from trees a mile away. In Silverpine Pack lands, wolves would hear it and tremble, knowing instinctively that something ancient and terrible had just awakened. Theron shifted back into his wolf form, then bowed his massive head. The other 9 warriors did the same. She is the matriarch. Their minds spoke as one, their voices somehow reaching her through a connection she didn't understand. She has risen, and the old world trembles. The days that followed were a blur of discovery. Theron and the Shadow Guard. She learned their names, their stories, their absolute unwavering loyalty, taught her everything they knew. They'd been bound by the same prophecy that had spoken of her, transformed centuries ago into guardians who would not age, would not die until they found their queen. We were once alphas ourselves, explained Lyria, the platinum-haired female warrior. From different packs, different times. But we each heard the moon goddess's call. She transformed us, extended our lives, gave us one purpose: to find you and protect you when you finally came into your power. They taught her to control her shifting, to move between forms as easily as breathing. Where it took other wolves 30 seconds of agony, Alara could shift in a heartbeat, her body flowing from human to wolf and back again like water. But the shifting was only the beginning. Your power isn't just physical, Theron explained, as they stood in a clearing deep in the neutral territory they'd claimed as temporary home. The matriarch is more than strength. You have the gifts that the first wolves possessed before power became diluted through generations. Alara discovered she could sense emotions like scents in the air. When Cassian, a warrior with eyes like amber, grew anxious about a perimeter check, she smelled it, a spike of sharp citrus and copper. When Lyria felt content after a successful hunt, Alara detected warm honey and summer grass. She could heal. When Mira, the youngest of the guard at only 200 years old, injured her leg during training, Alara had pressed her hand to the wound and felt power flow through her fingertips. The gash closed in seconds, leaving only smooth skin behind. And she could command. Not with an alpha's blunt force dominance, but with something older. When she spoke with intent, wolves obeyed. Not because they feared her, but because their very instincts recognized her authority as absolute. Alpha is a pack rank, Theron told her, as they sparred in the snow, him in wolf form, her human, but somehow still matching his speed. But matriarch is something else. You are what all wolves come from. You are the source. Every alpha in every pack carries a drop of your power in their veins, whether they know it or not. The bonding happened naturally. The Shadow Guard weren't just her protectors. They became her family. Cassian taught her to fight with a blade. Lyria showed her how to track prey across frozen ground. A massive warrior named Court, who rarely spoke, but whose loyalty ran bone deep, became her shadow, always within arm's reach when they trained. There were lighter moments, too. Mira had a wicked sense of humor and would shift into her wolf form, just to knock snow off tree branches onto unsuspecting warriors. Felix, whose copper-colored fur matched his wit, would tell stories of the old days that had everyone howling with laughter around the fire at night. And through it all, Theron remained constant. He pushed her hardest in training, but also showed her the most care. His scent of aged oak and storm had become as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. She caught him watching her sometimes with an expression she couldn't quite name, something between reverence and longing. "You're not just our queen," he told her one night, as they stood on a ridge overlooking the forest. The moon was nearly full again, painting everything silver. "You're the future. The hope that the old ways aren't lost forever." That power and compassion can coexist. Elara looked at him, at this ancient warrior who'd waited centuries for her, and felt something shift in her chest. Not a mate bond. Those were granted by the goddess, and hers had been broken. But something else. Something chosen. "What if I'm not ready?" she whispered. "What if I can't be what everyone needs?" Theron reached out, his scarred hand gentle as he tilted her chin up. "You don't have to be perfect, Elara. You just have to be true. And you," his voice dropped low, intimate, "are the truest wolf I've ever known." Time stopped. Elara felt her wolf stir, purring with approval. This was right. This was chosen. When Theron leaned down and kissed her, it felt nothing like the forced, destined pull of a fated mate bond. It felt like freedom, like choice, like coming home. Days turned to weeks. Elara grew stronger, more confident. The scared Omega who'd been cast out during the harvest moon was gone, burned away like morning mist. In her place stood something new, a queen who was learning her power, surrounded by warriors who would die for her. But she should have known peace never lasted. The scout was young, barely old enough to grow a full beard in human form. He'd been tracking a deer through the neutral territory when he'd caught their scent. More specifically, when he'd caught her scent. Lavender and morning dew, wildflowers, and something else now. Something that made his wolf whimper and tuck tail. Power. Raw, undiluted power. He'd hidden behind a fallen log, watching as she'd emerged from the forest. Watching as 10 massive wolves had followed her like shadows. Watching as she'd laughed at something one of them said, her face transformed by joy, her movements confident and sure. The scout had recognized her immediately. Elara Moonwhisper. The Omega who'd been rejected and cast out to die, except she wasn't dead. And she sure as hell wasn't an Omega anymore. He'd run back to Silverpine Lands as fast as his legs could carry him, bursting into the Alpha's residence with wild eyes and breathless words. She's alive, and she's not alone. Cade Blackthorn listened to the scout's report with growing unease. Elara alive was bad enough. He'd assumed exposure would handle that problem within a day or two. But Elara alive and accompanied by 10 unknown wolves, that was a threat. How large were they? He demanded. Huge, Alpha. Bigger than any wolf I've ever seen. And she, the scout swallowed hard. She smelled like power, like old magic. Beside Cade, Scarlet Redmane leaned forward, her red hair gleaming in the firelight. It's probably just rogues who found her and took pity. An Omega wouldn't survive alone. Her tone was dismissive, but Cade saw the flicker of concern in her eyes. We can't ignore this, said Beta Thomas, Cade's chief advisor. If she's building a rogue pack on our borders, then we eliminate the threat before it grows, Cade finished. His inner wolf was restless, pacing. Something about this felt wrong. The mate bond was severed. He'd made sure of that. But he still felt an inexplicable pull toward the forest, toward her. He shoved the feeling down. Sentiment was weakness. "Mobilize a war party," he ordered. 20 of our best fighters. We'll go at first light." The scout's face went pale. "Alpha, I don't think that wasn't a request." Theron smelled them coming from half a mile away. The scent of forest and embers, ozone and steel, accompanied by 20 other wolves. Anger and arrogance hung in the air like smoke. "They're here," he said quietly. Ilara, who'd been sparring with Cassian, froze. She'd known this moment would come. Part of her had been waiting for it. The broken mate bond still ached sometimes, a phantom pain she couldn't quite shake. But she wasn't the same wolf who'd been dragged from the ceremony crying. She wasn't the same person at all. "How many?" she asked, her voice steady. 23, including an alpha." Theron's eyes met hers. "It's him." Cade. Of course it was. The Shadow Guard assembled without needing orders, forming a protective formation around her. But Ilara raised her hand. "No," she said softly. "This is my territory. My people. I handle this." She walked to the edge of the clearing where the forest opened up and waited. They came like an army, 23 wolves moving through the trees with military precision. They were large, strong, well-trained. Any normal rogue pack would have fled at the sight of them. Ilara didn't move. They shifted as they entered the clearing, taking human form in that painful, crackling transformation she remembered. Cade stood at the front, flanked by his fighters. Scarlet was there too, her beautiful face twisted with smug satisfaction. Cade's eyes found Ilara and widened. Whatever he'd been expecting, it wasn't this. Not the woman who stood before him, radiating confidence, her eyes glowing with that otherworldly violet light, even in human form. "Ilara," his voice carried across the clearing, echoing off the rock face behind them. "You're trespassing on Silverpine territory." "No." Her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made several of his wolves step back. "You're trespassing on mine." Scarlet laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "You? An Omega with a handful of rogue mutts? You think you can claim territory?" Ilara's wolf stirred, and she felt her power rise like a tide. The scent of her emotions, cold fury mixed with absolute certainty, rolled across the clearing. Several of Silverpine's wolves whimpered. "Last chance," Cade said, though his voice had lost some of its confidence. "Submit, or we'll take you by force." "She is the matriarch," Theron's voice boomed from behind her. "You face the first daughter of the Luna's blade. Kneel or face judgment." Scarlet snarled and shifted before anyone could stop her, her russet wolf form launching across the clearing straight at Ilara. Time slowed. Ilara could see every detail, the fury in Scarlet's eyes, the way her claws extended for the kill, the trajectory that would tear out Ilara's throat. She could smell Scarlet's certainty, her absolute conviction that this would be an easy kill. Ilara shifted. The transformation took less than a heartbeat. One moment she was human, the next she was her massive wolf form, silver white and glowing. Scarlet's leap, which would have connected with a human target, fell hopelessly short. Ilara's paw came down on Scarlet's back mid-air, slamming the female alpha into the ground with enough force to crack earth. Scarlet yelped, the sound cutting off as the wind was knocked from her lungs. Ilara placed one massive paw on Scarlet's neck. Not enough pressure to kill, but enough to make the message clear. Scarlet struggled for a moment, then went still, exposing her throat in submission. The clearing was silent except for Scarlet's whimpering. Then the Shadow Guard shifted. 10 forms flowed from human to wolf, and Cade's army finally understood what they were facing. These weren't normal wolves. These were dire wolves, creatures from legend, each one standing taller than any alpha in their pack. Their eyes glowed with ancient power, their forms radiating strength that made the air itself tremble. Court's massive black wolf form moved to stand at Alara's right. Lyria's platinum wolf took her left. The others arranged themselves in a formation that screamed military precision and devastating power. 23 Silverpine wolves faced 10 guardians and 1 glowing matriarch, and every single one of Cade's warriors took a step back. Mercy. The word came from Cade, who had dropped to his knees. His eyes were wide, his face pale. The scent of his fear, acrid and sharp, filled the clearing. Please. Mercy. Alara shifted back to human form, standing over the still prone Scarlet. The female alpha had shifted back too, her body trembling. You rejected me, Alara said, her voice carrying to every wolf present. Called me weak, worthless, had me thrown into a blizzard to die. She paused, letting the words sink in. You made me Omega in a world where power is everything. You taught me that strength is the only thing that matters. Cade's head dropped lower. He knew what was coming. Execution. The law was clear. Challenge an alpha and win, you kill them. It was the way of the packs. But Alara had learned something else in her weeks with the Shadow Guard. She'd learned that true power wasn't just about strength. It was about wisdom, about mercy tempered with justice. I am not the wolf you threw away, she continued. I am Alara Stormcaller, matriarch of the Northern Territories, first daughter of the Luna's Blade. The title felt right on her tongue, especially the surname she'd chosen. Theron's name, marking her acceptance of him as her chosen mate. And I decree new laws for these lands. She lifted her head, her violet eyes sweeping across the assembled wolves. No wolf will be cast out for their rank. No Omega will be treated as lesser. Mates will be cherished, not rejected for ambition. And any alpha who rules through fear rather than wisdom will answer to me. She looked down at Scarlet, who stared up at her with a mixture of terror and grudging respect. You attacked first. You showed me what you value. Strength without honor. So I take your alpha status. You are beta now, and you will spend the next 5 years teaching Omega pups to fight, to defend themselves, to know their own worth. Maybe then you'll learn what true strength means. Ilara's gaze shifted to Cade. And you. You severed a mate bond because you feared appearing weak. You chose ambition over destiny. So I take your claim to leadership. Marcus Silverpine will continue as alpha until a worthy successor emerges. You will serve as his advisor, and you will learn what it means to put your pack before your pride. She raised her voice so every wolf in the clearing could hear. I claim these northern territories, from the Blackwater River to the Stone Ridge, from the Storm Peaks to the Silver Lake. This is my land now. Any pack that wishes to remain here will follow my laws. Any pack that refuses. She let power ripple through her voice, making the ground tremble. We'll face the Shadow Guard. Theron shifted back to human form, moving to stand beside her. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. The other 9 guardians remained in wolf form, a clear show of force. Spread the word, Theron said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. The matriarch has risen, the old ways are returning, and a new order begins today. Kipuine, still on his knees, looked up at Alara one final time. She saw regret in his eyes, deep, aching regret. She saw him finally understand what he'd thrown away, what he'd freed. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry, Alara. She could have scorned him, could have twisted the knife, but that's not who she was. Not anymore. I know, she said simply, and now you get to live with that choice, just like I got to live with mine. The difference is, I chose to survive. I chose to rise. That's on me. But you, your rejection, that's on you. Forever. She turned away from him, from Scarlet, from the 23 wolves who had come to destroy her. She walked back toward her guardians, toward Theron, toward the family she'd found in the cold and dark. Behind her, she heard Cade's wolves beginning to retreat, carrying news of the matriarch back to Silverpine lands. She heard Scarlet's humiliated sobs as the weight of her new rank and her new purpose settled on her shoulders. And she felt, for the first time since the harvest moon, truly free. 3 weeks later, Elara stood on the highest peak in her territory, looking out over forests and valleys she now protected. The moon was full again, painting everything in silver light. But this time, she wasn't watching from the sidelines. She was the center of attention, by choice and by right. Theron approached from behind, his arms wrapping around her waist. She leaned back into his warmth, into his certainty. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. Elara thought about the question, about the life she'd lost, the family who'd betrayed her, the pack that had cast her out, the mate who'd rejected her, about the Omega she'd been, scared and powerless. Then she thought about what she'd gained, the Shadow Guard, who'd become the family she'd always deserved, the territory she protected, the wolves who now looked to her for guidance and justice, the power she'd unlocked, the choice she'd made, and Theron, her chosen mate, standing beside her not because fate demanded it, but because they'd both decided this was right. "None," she said firmly. "Not a single one." He kissed her temple, and she felt the bond between them grow stronger, not the forced golden thread of fated mates, but something deeper, something built on respect and trust and love freely given. "The blood moon is coming," Theron murmured against her hair. 3 months from now. "The prophecy says it will bring a test, something ancient and dangerous." Elara smiled, her violet eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Then we'll face it together. All of us." The Shadow Guard had gathered below, their wolf forms arranged in a protective circle. They'd sworn their lives to her, and she'd sworn hers to them. They were more than guards. They were pack. They were home. And somewhere far to the south, in lands she'd never seen, something old was stirring. Something that had felt her awakening and was coming to challenge her claim. Something that would test everything she'd become. But tonight, Elara didn't think about future threats. Tonight, she stood on her mountain, surrounded by those who loved her, and felt completely whole for the first time in her life. She was no longer the rejected Omega. She was no longer the scared girl who'd been thrown away. She was the matriarch. She was the storm. She was the one they'd been waiting for. And she was just getting started. And so Ilara's journey from discarded Omega to the matriarch of the Northern Territories became the story whispered around pack fires, the legend that gave hope to every wolf who'd ever been told they were weak or worthless. She learned that true strength wasn't about domination. It was about choosing justice over vengeance, mercy over cruelty, and love over destiny. Her story reminds us that rejection isn't the end. Sometimes it's the beginning. Sometimes the very thing that breaks us is the thing that sets us free to become who we were always meant to be. What did you think of Elara's transformation? Have you ever felt cast aside, only to discover strength you didn't know you had? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey from Omega to Queen, make sure to hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't defined by those who fail to see it. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss the next chapter of this story. Because Alara's battles are far from over. The blood moon approaches, bringing with it an ancient evil that will threaten everything she's built, and she'll need every ounce of her newfound power to survive what's coming. Thank you for listening to Alara's story. We'll see you in the next chapter, where the shadows grow longer and the true test of a matriarch begins.